In my previous life, Ethan brought a young woman into the company and announced that she would replace me as the department director. I raised an eyebrow. Ethan, she just graduated college. Are you sure? He calmed down and agreed to let her start from the ground up. Later, however, during a business trip, the girl was drugged and taken advantage of by Richie. She lost her dignity and became a caged bird. Ethan glared at me with resentment in his eyes. Olivia, did you do this on purpose? In retaliation, he had me drugged and violated until I died, just so I could feel the same pain she did. But then I was reborn, back to the moment when Ethan stormed into the conference room. This time, I smiled and said, "All right, I'll step down." Calmly, I left the meeting, waiting for the day his company would collapse. When I died in an abandoned building. It was eerily silent, the perfect location Ethan had chosen. After the morning meeting, he told me a distributor was dissatisfied with my product and wanted to discuss it. "You should go smooth things over," he said. Coincidentally, the secretary was called away for another meeting. Coincidentally, I went alone. Coincidentally, my tire was punctured by nails, forcing me to stop and check. Then, just as coincidentally, a group of thugs dragged me into the abandoned building and forced bottle after bottle of cheap, foul-smelling liquor down my throat. In my haze, I could hear the sound of fabric tearing, and then it was me who was torn apart. Ethan said we could do whatever we wanted. The physical pain was excruciating, but worse, far worse, was the searing pain in my heart when I heard Ethan's name mentioned. I quickly pieced everything together. The isolated location, the meeting, the nails, it was all orchestrated by Ethan. But why? I had been with Ethan's company for over 8 years, pouring my heart and soul into helping his family build their empire. I was loyal. I was dedicated. I practically lived at the office for their sake. Ethan and I had grown up together. We were childhood friends. Even when we butted heads at work, I was always the one to apologize, to back down. There was no reason for him to hold a grudge against me. Unless it was because of Lily. The night Lily resigned, Ethan, drunk and furious, barged into my office. He slammed over my desk, destroying the project I had worked on all night. "Olivia, if it weren't for you, Lily wouldn't have ended up like this. She's such a pure and innocent girl, and it's all because of you." Innocent? I couldn't fathom how Ethan saw people. But arguing with a drunk was pointless, so I grabbed my car keys and tried to walk past him. "Ethan, you've had too much. Go home and rest," I advised calmly. But Ethan shoved me to the floor with force. "You sent Lily on that business trip. Did you do it on purpose?" I couldn't answer him, because that night I ended up in the hospital with a fractured tailbone after being slammed into the corner of the desk. I was bedridden for 2 months. Even now, on rainy days, the pain was unbearable. The physical pain, however, was nothing compared to the realization that dawned on me during those agonizing nights. I finally understood why Ethan had orchestrated everything against me. It was because news had recently surfaced about Lily's pregnancy. 2. What do you think, Director Olivia? The stench of sweat and booze vanished in an instant. Instead, I smelled the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. I realized I was sitting in a spacious, sunlit executive conference room. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, warming my skin. Ethan stood before me, leaning on the table, his expression resolute. And then it hit me I had been reborn. I was back on the very day Ethan announced his plan to bring Lily into the company. "Olivia, don't worry," Ethan assured me. "Your salary won't be affected, and the department will still report to you. Lily will just act as a layer between us." Before I could respond, one of the senior executives from finance couldn't hold back anymore. "Ethan, do you even hear what nonsense you're saying?" Charlie, who was in his 50s, was usually a master of diplomacy, always playing the middle ground. His sole career goal seemed to be making it to retirement without any drama, but now his face was flushed with anger. He was genuinely furious. Ethan's proposal was absurd, to say the least. Yes, Lily was an orphan he had sponsored for years. Yes, they shared a close bond, but at the end of the day, she was just a fresh graduate. If word got out that a rookie was stepping on my shoulders to climb the ladder, the business world wouldn't know whether to laugh at me or at Ethan's apparent lack of judgment. But Lily had always had a way of driving Ethan mad. When she struggled to find a job after graduating, all it took was a tearful visit to Ethan's home, and he handed her a golden ticket straight into the executive suite of his company. And me. I had worked tirelessly for 8 years, shedding blood, sweat, and tears to earn my position. Now, Ethan was nonchalantly deciding I should step aside for her. "If Olivia has no objections," Ethan began. In my previous life, I had raised an eyebrow and questioned him. "Ethan, she just graduated college. Are you sure?" Ethan, still new to running the company at the time, had been forced to back down after the senior executives rallied behind me. But after everything I had endured, the abandoned building, the shattered trust, I was exhausted. I had always believed hard work would be rewarded, but Ethan had taught me the harsh lesson of betrayal. He had shown me what it meant to trust a snake. So this time, under the watchful eyes of everyone in the room, I smiled sweetly. "All right, Ethan." Ethan was momentarily stunned. Then he relaxed and smiled with the confidence of a victor. "I knew you'd see reason." But before he could finish, I cut him off. "Ethan, I'm formally submitting my resignation to you. I haven't taken a single day of my 10-day annual leave this year, so with the 1-month notice period, this Friday will be my last day at the company." I wasn't even finished when Ethan slammed his palm on the table. It was his signature move when he was really angry. In the past, I would have immediately lowered my head, apologized, and abandoned what I thought was the right decision. After all, my working life was no different from a courtesan from historical times, selling her body to survive. Dependent on others, the most important thing was to appease the benefactor. And Ethan was my benefactor. But today, I was determined to buy my freedom. "Ethan, I'll send my resignation letter to you and HR shortly." I gave him a polite smile and left the conference room. His face was so dark it looked like a storm was brewing. Things weren't supposed to turn out this way between Ethan and me. We were childhood friends and grew up together. When I was 10, Uncle took me out of the orphanage and brought me to their family estate. At first, Ethan treated me like I didn't exist. Later, when we started middle school, he must have realized I wasn't a threat, and his attitude softened a bit. He'd wait for me to walk to school together and occasionally ask me to have lunch with him at school. Once, some boys in our class mocked me. "Olivia, isn't she just Ethan's little live-in maid?" Oh, but a nerdy bookworm like her is probably boring in bed. Young Master Ethan might not even be interested. That day, Ethan happened to come to pick me up from school. He raised his fist and beat the boy until his face was covered in blood, kneeling and begging for mercy. In the end, it was Uncle who paid to smooth things over and grounded Ethan for a month during the summer break. When I brought meals to him, he was playing video games. Suddenly, he paused the game and snapped at me. "Olivia, have you really started thinking of yourself as some kind of live-in maid? There are so many housekeepers at home. We don't need you to do this." After that, I stopped bringing him meals. But then he came to knock on my door late at night. "Olivia, I don't get this question. Can you help me?" Ethan almost never studied, but I still patiently tutored him from the very beginning. After all, he and Uncle were the ones who saved me from despair. Back then, I thought, Ethan is so good. Uncle is so good. I'll dedicate my entire life to repaying the two of them. So I started interning at Ethan's company before I even graduated, and I worked harder than anyone else. But I never expected that one day in the future, I'd be forced to repay my debt with my life. "Olivia, sister." When I pulled open the conference room door, I was greeted by the sight of Lily, delicate and thin. She wore a cheap-looking white chiffon dress. But on her, the dress gave off a fragile, pitiful snowflake vibe. At this moment, Snowflake's face was full of panic and guilt. She grabbed the hem of my dress. "Sister, Ethan told me about you. He said you're amazing. I just wanted to work with you." That's all. In my previous life, I fell for these words and brought Lily into my department. I assigned my best subordinates to personally mentor her. I scheduled regular one-on-one meetings to help her climb the ranks faster. But Lily didn't perform well. In fact, she barely focused on her work. When I sent her to Ethan's office to get signatures, she somehow ended up spending the whole afternoon there. When I walked in, she was giving Ethan a shoulder massage. "Sorry, Liv, Ethan looked so tired. I'll head back now." Ethan waved her to stay. Then he picked apart my report, criticizing every detail, clearly trying to put me in my place. So I stayed late to work overtime. Lily, meanwhile, sat in Ethan's luxury sports car, admiring the starlit ceiling. Now, having lived through everything once before, I looked at Lily, her eyelashes glistening with unshed tears, and caught a glimmer of satisfaction in her expression. I suddenly smiled. Ethan always thought Lily was a resilient little snowflake. But what he didn't know was that the flower he was nurturing was actually a parasitic vine, incapable of surviving without clinging to someone powerful. So, I said, "Congratulations on your promotion, Lily." A smile crept onto her face, but she quickly masked it with a look of surprise. "Oh, no, Sister Olivia, I'm not good enough for that." I shook my head. "Well, I've already submitted my resignation to Ethan. I'm starting my vacation next week. The timeline is tight, so why don't we start transitioning responsibilities this afternoon?" As soon as I finished speaking, the room fell silent. Lily's face turned pale. Of course, a parasitic flower like her couldn't possibly survive on her own. "Lily, don't worry. Ethan must have been arguing with the other executives for a while. He had just stepped out of the conference room. He looked exhausted. But when he saw Lily's worried expression, his face softened with concern. Did I upset Sister Olivia? Is that why she suddenly wants to leave?" Lily's voice trembled as she spoke, her eyes welling up with tears. "But I really admire her." Lily was on the verge of crying. I almost choked from the overwhelming green tea vibes wafting off her. Unfortunately, Ethan had no sense of smell. He couldn't detect it. He simply said, "Olivia, come to my office. And don't forget, I'm still your boss." I followed him into the CEO's office, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. I understood their plan perfectly. It was flawless, really. I did the work, and Lily took the credit. I was the renowned Olivia in the industry, and Lily could stand on my shoulders to become an even brighter star. As long as I was there, Lily didn't need to lift a finger or know anything. She could flourish as a beautiful parasitic flower. But the one unexpected variable in their plan was me. "Olivia, do you really have to be so stubborn? Just apologize to Lily right now, and I can pretend nothing happened in the meeting room earlier." I silently stared at Ethan. He seemed to think I was hesitating, ready to compromise. "Think about it. Over the years, how many times have you argued with me? If it weren't for the fact that we grew up together, you wouldn't even have a place here at Ethan Corp." Ethan put on a magnanimous act, as if making me answer to someone else was already a lenient decision. But were those arguments really my fault? Or was it that the young Ethan, only 3 years into leading the company, needed to assert his authority by undermining me? "If you have nothing else to discuss, Ethan, I'll be leaving now. No matter how many times you ask, my decision will remain the same." Bang! The photo frame on the desk was knocked to the floor by Ethan's hand. Inside was a picture of us with Uncle, taken the year we graduated high school. That old, slightly worn glass frame was my graduation gift to him. Now it was shattered. And so was the bond that had spanned 2 lifetimes. I hesitated only for a moment before walking out without looking back. What followed felt like a montage. Executives took turns storming into Ethan's office to protest. But perhaps because I had angered him so much this time, no matter how much the veterans pleaded, he refused to revoke Lily's appointment. "The current director of marketing is Lily," he insisted firmly. Before long, I handed over my responsibilities to the new director. Lily, as usual, wore an absent-minded expression, nodding repeatedly and saying, "Got it." But as soon as I finished explaining something, she would immediately rush into Ethan's office. "Ethan, I hope I didn't upset Olivia. She spoke so quickly this afternoon. Could you explain it to me again?" Once, while passing by, I saw Lily leaning so close to Ethan that their faces were almost touching. Their gazes lingered, the atmosphere intimate. It felt like the next moment might lead to something more. I smirked. The deeper they fell into their little romance, the more spectacular the gift I'd prepared for them would be. On my last day at the company, the entire department came to bid me goodbye with tears in their eyes. Charlie, my secretary, even hugged me and wiped her tears on my white suit jacket. "Liv, if you're leaving, why don't you take me with you?" Charlie had been with me for 4 years, smart, capable, and dependable. I'd seen her grow from a hesitant fresh graduate into a confident and independent professional. Good subordinates are as rare as good bosses. But in this moment, I still gently pushed her away. "The last thing I need right now is your loyalty. Just survive here at Ethan Corp for now and wait for me to come back for you, okay?" Charlie froze for a second, then wiped away one last tear on my suit. Once her tears had dried, I opened the blinds in my office. She shouted at me, "Olivia, why haven't you finished packing yet? Are you going to make our dear Lily wait for you?" That day, I left amidst the complicated gazes of my colleagues. That day, Olivia, who had dominated the industry for 8 years, vanished. But I knew the show I'd prepared was about to begin. Because as I walked out, I ran into Richie Maxwell at the building's entrance. In my previous life, Lily and Richie's meeting wasn't something I orchestrated. But Lily's silence made it look like I was at fault. It seemed as though I'd sent her on a business trip that led to her encountering Richie, where she was forcibly intoxicated and lost her dignity. I was cast as the snowflake that triggered the avalanche. But the truth was, as my subordinates later told me, Lily herself had chosen the restaurant for that business dinner. The exclusive and exorbitantly priced restaurant in Beverly Hills, so expensive it nearly broke the supplier's budget, just so happened to be Richie Maxwell's favorite hangout. And at the end of the night, after everyone had left, "We don't know why Lily went back there," they'd said. When I learned of this, I simply nodded. That weekend, I brought it up to Ethan, intending to console him that people have their own paths in life. Perhaps Lily was now living the life she'd always dreamed of, but Ethan lashed out at me instead. "Olivia, how did I not see before how malicious you can be? She's just an innocent young woman. How could she possibly have any ulterior motives? Don't think that accusing her of baseless schemes will make you feel better about yourself." I was wrong. I had forgotten that, over the past couple of years, Ethan no longer believed a word I said. He questioned every proposal I made at work. How could he possibly believe me now when I was trying to expose Lily's true nature? So in this new life, I understood that kind words often fall on deaf ears. Actions, however, speak volumes, but I didn't do anything particularly dramatic. I merely sent a collaboration proposal email to Richie Maxwell's secretary under Lily's name. The proposal was casually pieced together from some materials I had written before. The highlight, however, was the photo of Lily at the end, an image I had carefully selected. Her delicate and charming expression bore a striking resemblance to Maxwell's ex-wife, as well as the women he had dated over the years. Indeed, this was the secret behind Lily's rise in the previous life. And now, it served as the invitation I was truly sending to Maxwell this time. Richie, ever the devoted and sentimental man, surprised everyone. Despite rarely leaving Manhattan these days, he graciously accepted the invitation and stepped through the doors of Ethan's corporation. He even sat through Lily's rambling, nonsensical presentation, keeping a composed demeanor. Without batting an eye, he said, "Snowflake did a great job. Let's start by investing $10 million to test the waters." Ethan was stunned, yet overjoyed. He immediately ended Lily's internship early and signed her permanent contract, officially confirming her position as director. That night, as I lay in the bathtub, I received a message from him. "Olivia, you see. The world keeps spinning without you. It might even spin better." I chuckled and turned off my screen. Just 10 minutes earlier, I had received a message from Charlie. Maxwell's secretary asked for Lily's contact info. I overheard it. Tusk. Taking a sip of wine, I suddenly felt curious. What expression would Ethan have when he finally discovered that Snowflake had climbed the ladder? After all, she was his beloved, innocent little girl. In the previous life, Lily had been taken back to Manhattan by Maxwell after revealing her pregnancy. Until she discovered she was pregnant, she obediently worked at Ethan's company, playing the role of the pure-hearted Snowflake. I even stumbled upon trending topics about her and Ethan one day. Ethan, the CEO, has been sponsoring a student for years. Photos of the two revealed one photo was from 4 years ago, when Lily had just enrolled at Stanford. The other was recent, showing the once naive girl now dressed in professional attire, confidently standing beside Ethan. Truly, what a perfect match they appeared to be. Such a wholesome story. Snowflake worked hard to get close to the CEO. I'm crying if I may. Ethan's gaze wasn't exactly pure even 4 years ago. First time hearing about Ethan's company sponsoring underprivileged students buying their products this Black Friday. For sure, consider my purchase a wedding gift. Haha, I immediately understood. This was likely the PR department burning through its leftover annual budget, buying ad space to flatter Ethan. Yet, perhaps beauty does have its own justice. The campaign actually garnered Lily and Ethan a growing number of Lily Ethan fans online, with some even creating daily discussion forums. As the topic gained traction, Ethan's company saw its Black Friday pre-sales figures soar several times higher. Ethan, riding high on this success, generously rewarded the PR team with an extra month's bonus. He even personally responded to fans, "Thank you all for your kind wishes. Lily is such a hardworking young woman, I'm still pursuing her." Fans went wild, shouting, "We're obsessed." But I heard that Lily declined the PR department's suggestion to create a Twitter account and join the public conversation. I'm not good with words, and I wouldn't know how to respond appropriately. Besides, I still have so much to learn, I'm not worthy of Ethan yet. I understood. Perhaps her bigger fish hadn't taken the bait yet, and Lily wasn't willing to settle for Ethan prematurely. But the backup plan still smiled indulgently. "No, Lily, you're more than worthy, but it's okay, I can wait." Charlie said the tension between the two was practically palpable. Unfortunately, it was during a 40 or 50-person cross-department meeting. By 8 p.m., rumbling stomachs filled the room, and no one wanted to watch the CEO and Snowflake's romantic drama anymore. Yet, as always, employees dared not voice their frustrations. Only mischievous Charlie dared to reflect this interaction verbatim in the company-wide meeting notes. The next day, the ladies in administration reenacted the scene at their desks while snacking on sunflower seeds. "Hey, Jess, don't forget to send me that report this afternoon." "Liz, I'm not good at this, I can't figure it out." "That's okay, I can wait." When Lily walked past, her face nearly froze. She went to confront Charlie, only to be met with an innocent expression. "Huh. Director Lily, didn't you say my meeting notes should be transcribed word for word?" "You," Lily's eyes reddened, and she looked like she might shatter in the next moment. Yet she couldn't find a reason to rebuke Charlie, as it was indeed her prior instruction. Lily remembered Ethan's tastes, preferences, even where to apply pressure during massages. But she never seemed to recall work-related information. Once, old Tom had sarcastically quipped, "Young people with memory loss already." She had run out of the meeting room in tears, then privately scolded Charlie. "How can your meeting notes be so incomplete? What were you even doing during the meeting?" From then on, Charlie typed so much she developed carpal tunnel syndrome. Especially during meetings with Ethan and Lily, she would secretly message me, "I feel like some automatic scriptwriter for billionaire romance novels. Sometimes it even feels a bit R-rated." On the day I left Seattle, I had the misfortune to run into Ethan. He stood tall in his sharp suit, looking down at me. "Olivia, are you going on a trip to clear your head, or are you job hunting?" He was confident. After all, my departure from Ethan Corp wasn't exactly amicable. With Ethan Corp's influence in New York, no other company would dare take me in this hot potato. If I wanted to switch jobs, my only option was to leave the city quietly and start over somewhere else. "If you want to come back and apologize, I might still give you a chance," Ethan said, his tone full of certainty. He even reached out and grabbed the boarding pass from my hand, glancing at it. "Seattle, nice scenery. Great for a vacation. Take another week off and then come back to work. Same position as before. What do you say?" Looking at Ethan's smug expression, I felt like I didn't even recognize him anymore. To him, was I just some spineless puppet he could humiliate at will? No matter what happened, would the Olivia who owed the Ethan family her gratitude always come crawling back to Ethan Corp, head bowed and compliant? Maybe in another life, yes, but not the Olivia who had already died once. I snatched the boarding pass back from Ethan's hand. "Mr. Ethan, your jokes are quite funny." I turned and walked away briskly. Behind me, I heard Ethan lose his temper and shout, "Olivia, I hate it when you act like this. Stubborn as a damn rock in a swamp, oh rocks." So what? Didn't the legendary Monkey King spring from a rock? Didn't Wuthering Heights have its foundation in wild, unyielding hearts? Sure, my temper is bad and my will is unyielding. But all these years, every challenge I've faced, I've tackled head-on. For all the nonsense Ethan has spouted lately, his comparison of me to a rock, that one I don't mind. Better to be a defiant, unbreakable rock than a delicate, wilting snowflake. When I landed in Seattle, I followed my memories from my past life and found a quaint little inn. The owner, Ethan, was an artist who spent his days painting in the courtyard. Naive, young, and passionate just like I had been when I first joined Ethan Corp with nothing else to do, I pulled up a chair, basked in the sun, and chatted with him. After a few days, we struck up a friendship. I told him about the absurd events back in New York, and he was outraged on my behalf. "That guy Ethan. What an idiot," he said. "If I were him, I'd just hand the company over to you. Then you could focus on running things and I could focus on painting. Wouldn't that be perfect?" I chuckled and sipped the tea he brewed. Exactly. Then, I let a bit of melancholy creep into my expression. But after 8 years, I really am tired. Maybe this is a chance to bow out gracefully. He opened his mouth as if to argue but hesitated. In the end, he turned back to his canvas without saying another word. I sipped my tea quietly, waiting for the right moment. It didn't take long. News broke that Maxwell, the CEO of Maxwell Corp., had embezzled funds and fled the country. The next morning, as I headed to a nearby cafe for breakfast, I ran into Ethan just as he was leaving. He had swapped his usual loose-fitting casual clothes for a button-down shirt and slacks. "Off to a wedding?" I asked, surprised. Ethan shook his head. "Family matters," he said, his expression complicated as he glanced at me for a few seconds. But in the end, he left without saying more. "Take care," I said with a nod. "No rush. These things take time." Sure enough, while Ethan was away, a recruiter I knew reached out. "Did you interview at Maxwell Corp? There's word they're looking into you." I didn't respond. I kept sunbathing in the courtyard, letting Maxwell Corp dig around as much as they wanted. 3 days later, Ethan returned. It was late, the alley outside silent, but he knocked on my door. When I opened it, I found him looking exhausted, as though he had just been through a storm. Yet there was a newfound sharpness in his gaze. Ethan stared at me intently. "Olivia, I have a proposal I'd like to discuss with you." Ethan Corp in New York, Maxwell Corp in Los Angeles. Their company sizes were similar, and the deaths of their patriarchs occurred around the same time. 3 years ago, Uncle Ethan and the late Mr. Maxwell passed away within months of each other. Ethan rushed back from overseas to take over Ethan Corp right after finishing grad school. Meanwhile, Maxwell's heir, Ethan, handed over the reins to a professional manager. Aside from attending the annual shareholders' meetings, he stayed out of the company's affairs entirely. People mocked him for squandering a golden opportunity. But after being suppressed by Ethan for years and now getting a second chance at life, I saw Ethan in a new light. He was smart, someone who understood the value of delegation. Why should an internationally recognized artist give up his craft to run a company? Knowing how to identify and trust talent was enough. That's why, in this lifetime, I saw Ethan as a promising business partner. Especially since I remembered that not long after Lily entered the picture, the scandal about Maxwell's CEO embezzling funds broke. Ethan needed a new professional manager, and I needed a position higher than director. So yes, moving into his inn was deliberate. I wanted to be the Olivia he met at a low point in his life. The one chatting and basking in the sun with the town's little painter Olivia, not the cold, lifeless resume piled among A4 papers. So when he realizes he's been stabbed in the back, the first person he might think of as trustworthy would be me. And now, "Olivia, what do you think?" Ethan asked, his seemingly calm face beginning to show traces of sweat. To be honest, he had already offered me a rather lucrative package, but I stayed silent for a long time, hesitating to nod. People don't usually cherish things they obtain too easily. That's a lesson Ethan once taught me. So I waited for Ethan to come back to me repeatedly, showing true sincerity. What's more, even though he'd multiplied my salary several times over, taking just a paycheck would mean I'd remain nothing but an employee, a replaceable pawn. When Ethan approached me for the second time, I brought up the matter of equity, asking for a rather daring percentage. I waited for his reaction, perhaps some hesitation or accusations of greed. After all, that's how commercial negotiations work. If I want 100, I'll propose 200, while the other side, even if holding 200 in their pocket, will feign difficulty and claim they only have 20. I assumed Ethan, having grown up in this competitive circle, would be no different. But to my surprise, he simply said, "All right, I'll talk to my lawyer and come back with the contract for you to sign." Then, like a cheerful puppy wagging its tail, he left my room with a spring in his step. Seriously, I was stunned. This negotiation had gone so smoothly that it barely felt like a negotiation at all. It was more like me taking advantage of Ethan. Even after I followed Ethan to New York, everything felt like a surreal dream. It was as though just moments ago, I was still stuck in a rundown and grimy apartment complex. And now, Olivia Knox had become the new CEO of Ethan Enterprises. The moment I signed the contract, Ethan's expression showed a sense of relief. Years later, when I thought back to that moment, I couldn't help but laugh. Ethan, why did you trust me so much back then? After all, we'd only spent a week together in the town. The man, rare as it was, lifted his gaze from his sketchpad. Your 8 years at Uncle's company proved your loyalty and capability. There's no reason for me to doubt you. Bringing you on as CEO was, without question, the best investment I've ever made in all these years. Olivia, you're incredible. Everyone knows that except maybe that certain someone with the last name Ethan. On my first official day as CEO of Ethan Enterprises, news of Uncle's company once again dominated the trending topics. But this time, it was a public roast. The reason? A series of atrocious new advertisements Uncle's company had released. Take lingerie, for example. If you don't wear this, how can you outperform other women in the workplace? Or hotels. The screen showed a scantily clad young woman smiling at the camera, with a voiceover saying, "Even cheap hotels can lead you to your destined one, and let's not forget personal care products. Research shows that women's odors are 3 times stronger than men's use these products to fix it." I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Uncle's company had always relied on a female consumer base, yet their new ad copy seemed designed to drive them away. But I wasn't surprised. In my previous life, I had once asked Lily to work on a similar project. Her ad copy, let's just say it made me feel the world was one giant Edinburgh tragedy. I tried to explain to her, our target consumers are women. Could you shift your perspective a little? But she just looked up at me, teary-eyed. Olivia, am I really that stupid? I was so afraid you wouldn't like it that I even showed it to Ethan before sending it to you. He didn't see any issues with it either. Well then. At that moment, I knew neither of them was cut out for this line of work. And since Lily used Ethan as her shield, I didn't bother trying to teach her further. I simply waited for her tears to dry naturally, and that was the end of it. So, in this life, when I heard Ethan appointed her as the head of marketing, I couldn't help but laugh. All right, go ahead. Ethan didn't understand. Lily's advertising campaigns were practically express tickets to negative trending topics. Does Uncle's company think we're consumers or commodities? It's 2023. Why are there still such male-centric ads? I'm never buying from Uncle's company again. Wasn't Uncle's company the one with the marketing exec who shipped herself with the CEO? Disgusting. Ads aside, stop selling us your personal drama. Ugh, I used to be into that. Why didn't someone stop me? Uncle's company's stock price plummeted. Many of its once loyal customers turned away, seeking alternatives. And that's when people suddenly realized. The products from Ethan Enterprises, long overshadowed, were affordable, effective, and no worse than Uncle's. I feel so guilty. I always thought XXX was some no-name brand, but it turns out it's actually Ethan Enterprises. Here's a list of Ethan Enterprises local gems. Who knew all these belonged to them? Ethan Enterprises, please, we're begging you start marketing yourselves. The previous CEO of Ethan Enterprises hadn't cared much about marketing. But thankfully, he was a brilliant engineer who had invested significant resources into the R&D department, developing numerous patented technologies. So, I instructed the marketing department to act swiftly. Every detail about the product, its unique ingredients, benefits, pricing, and target audience was meticulously organized. Consumer feedback was addressed on the official accounts, with proposed improvements outlined for all to see. Thanks to the product's solid quality and our sincere attitude, it stood in stark contrast to the previous disastrous advertising campaigns of Ethan's company. The stock price graphs of the two companies intertwined on the charts. Ethan's company plummeted while ours soared. The day Ethan's company trended on social media for all the wrong reasons, Lily quietly resigned. Ethan, bombarded with bad news all day, wanted to visit Lily's office before leaving work to console the seemingly disheartened girl. But all he found was an empty room. On her desk lay only a resignation letter. "Miss Lily's been leaving early these days," Charlie, who had already tendered her resignation, said nonchalantly as she passed by. Ethan didn't catch the hint. He assumed that Lily, his delicate little snowflake, had resigned quietly out of a strong sense of guilt. Panicked, Ethan rushed to the upscale apartment he had purchased for Lily, only to find it abandoned. Calls went unanswered. Desperation set in, and he reported her disappearance to the police. The officers, seasoned in dealing with crises, barely lifted an eyebrow as they told him, "Come back after 24 hours." Red-eyed, Ethan spent the entire day searching for Lily himself. In doing so, he completely ignored the critical 24-hour window for addressing his company's PR disaster and didn't set foot in the office. The next time Ethan saw news about Lily, it was 2 days later, in the headlines of a local newspaper. Richie Maxwell returns with new partner familiar face, rumored pregnancy. The once stubborn and modest snowflake he remembered was now draped in glittering luxury, her arm linked tightly with that of a middle-aged man, as though clinging to her golden ticket for life. Her face radiated happiness. In the previous timeline, Lily's business trip to the city was low profile, and there had been no such grand spectacle of her returning hand in hand with Maxwell. Ethan believed the gossip circulating in their social circle. Poor Lily had been taken advantage of during that business trip, losing herself to the whims of Richie Maxwell. And who was to blame for this tragedy? Of course, it was me, the one who had sent her on that trip. But this time, the story unfolded without my involvement. Lily had chosen to leave Ethan's company during its moment of crisis, throwing herself willingly and gleefully into Maxwell's embrace. Ethan was left with no choice but to face reality. By now, it was the 3rd day of the social media scandal, and my company had already capitalized on the surge in attention. Meanwhile, Ethan's PR team was still waiting for his approval on which crisis response strategy to implement. His only reply was, "Whatever." Then he disappeared into bars, drowning his heartbreak in alcohol for an entire week. What can I say? In romantic novels, a tycoon losing his mind for love might seem endearing. But in the real world, Ethan's vanishing act during a turbulent period only alienated those around him further. It was time. I booked a flight to River City. I knew my moment to reap the rewards had arrived. "Olivia, I've missed you so much," Charlie, now the company's chief secretary, burst into tears and snot when she saw me, smearing it all over me. She had been promoted, given a raise, and no longer had to serve as a glorified typewriter. Together, we met with many former suppliers, and over drinks and banter, we secured numerous deals. It was the end of the year, the season for renewing contracts. Ethan's company was on the brink of implosion, while under my leadership, ours was thriving. The choice was clear for anyone with half a brain. One evening, during a business dinner, I overheard a story about Ethan's latest romantic escapade. The latest chapter. Ethan had flown to the city, confronted Lily, and begged her to elope with him. "Lily, you must have been coerced into this, right?" But Lily said nothing, nervously shaking him off. The naive Ethan was then beaten half to death by Maxwell's bodyguards lurking in the shadows. Doesn't he know that Richie Maxwell built his empire with ties to the underworld? "The man's clearly drunk himself stupid," a friend remarked. I thought back to the days when Uncle and I had shielded Ethan from the harshness of the world. Perhaps we had protected him too well. Even now, he carried a childish sense of entitlement. What I didn't expect, however, was for Ethan's drunken wanderings to lead him to my doorstep. When he saw me, his eyes lit up, and he stumbled toward me, blood streaking his face. In a voice full of longing, he called out, "Liv." The last time Ethan had called me, that was 10 years ago. Over time, our relationship had fallen apart piece by piece. He began to see me as some kind of imaginary villain, constantly belittling and undermining me. But now he was saying, "Liv, can we start over? I've realized you're the only one who truly cares about me." I couldn't help but laugh. I turned away, walking past him. But the next moment, I was shoved against the wall with brute force. In the darkness of that instant, memories of a stifling scene from the previous timeline flooded my mind. The sharp scent of alcohol, the oppressive weight, my entire body began to tremble uncontrollably. But Ethan continued his self-centered performance. "Liv, I was deceived by Lily. I always thought she resembled you, the you from the past, so I fell for her. But she's not you, she's nothing but a gold digger. Liv, come back, will you? Ethan pleaded hoarsely, his expression growing increasingly desperate. He failed to notice the panic etched across my face. I forced myself to suppress the surge of fear and told myself to stay calm. With a deep breath, I quickly regained the composure of someone who had been given a second chance at life. Then, without hesitation, I lifted my leg and delivered a hard kick to Ethan's lower half. Taking advantage of the moment when Ethan collapsed in pain, I turned and unlocked the door's fingerprint sensor. He continued calling out, "Liv." His voice, filled with longing, abruptly ceased as the next second unfolded. Standing in the doorway, slightly disheveled, was Ethan. "Hey, sis, why is there a mad dog outside our front door?" he asked, taking my hand, the one Ethan had grabbed, and reddened and blowing on it gently. "Your hand is all red. Does it hurt, sis?" I shook my head. Ethan froze for a few seconds before recognizing the face beside me. The ties between the Ethan family and the Maxwell family were not entirely unfamiliar. "Olivia, so that's why the Maxwells made you CEO. I was wrong. You and Lily are exactly the same, climbing up by selling yourself, relying on men for power." Ethan's tone was filled with anger, yet he seemed strangely thrilled, as though uncovering my imagined downfall made him feel superior. Ethan leaned his chin against my shoulder, his gaze fixed on Ethan with the disdain one might have for a lowly insect. "Mr. Ethan, unlike you, I don't mix business with personal affairs," Ethan said coolly. "But now that you bring it up, I should thank you. If it weren't for you letting Liv leave Ethan Enterprises so easily, I might never have gotten her to take the CEO position of my own company." Ethan shut the door and locked it, leaving Ethan outside, lost and defeated. I turned my attention to the lazy cat sprawled on the sofa. "Maxwell, done with your gallery exhibit? When are you heading back to New York?" Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he propped his chin with one hand and gazed at me. "Liv, I just helped you get back at him. Aren't you going to thank me?" "You're right, I should thank you. Then how about covering the cost of staying at my place?" To be honest, there's not much gossip-worthy drama between Ethan and me. He came to Chicago for an art exhibit and, disliking hotels, decided to crash at my place. Coincidentally, he ran into the one person he despises most in my history, Ethan. At first, I thought Ethan had come here as the majority shareholder to oversee my performance as the new CEO. But after a few days of him staying, not a single word about work cropped up. Ethan used to micromanage even the smallest decisions, treating me as his sounding board for everything. Now, with Ethan trusting me completely, I found myself a bit unaccustomed to the change. Before leaving, Ethan simply said, "I just wanted to see how you're doing. Running the company is not my expertise. I just know that if you're in a good state, everything will fall into place, and my dividends next year will grow." Under the winter sunlight, Ethan smiled carelessly. "Liv, wasn't the deal always that I get to be a carefree rich guy? Perhaps it was an illusion, but on the coldest day of the year, I thought I could hear the sound of ice and snow melting." The days that followed unfolded like dominoes tumbling in sequence. Maxwell Enterprises opened a branch in Chicago, with its stock price and market share steadily climbing. Meanwhile, Ethan Enterprises faced a wave of cancellations from suppliers, leading to production shortages and plummeting revenue. Ethan was forced to make drastic cuts to business lines and lay off employees, hoping to somehow survive the harsh winter. But fate has its way of balancing the scales. Come early spring, Ethan didn't see his stock price rebound. Instead, he ended up in a car accident. As fate would have it, the day of his accident coincided with the date of my death in my previous life, the day I was forced to drink cheap whiskey in a damp, abandoned building. This time, however, it was Ethan who lost his legs and became dependent on others for daily life. "Liv, that guy Ethan called again," Charlie said cautiously, observing my expression. Since his surgery, Ethan had been calling me every day, begging me to visit him at the hospital. But I was busy with new business for the Chicago branch and had no intention of entertaining him. He said he wanted to apologize about that abandoned building incident. "Sis, do you know what he's talking about?" I froze. In an instant, I felt as though I had been dragged back to that wet and cold building, my limbs bound, my cries for help unanswered. Ah, the abandoned building. Ethan's handiwork from my previous life. How could I ever forget? Could it be that Ethan, after his accident, had also been reborn? I heard myself say, "All right, let's go to the hospital." When I entered the hospital room, Ethan, pale-faced, was staring out the window at a pear tree, its branches adorned with delicate snowflakes. When he noticed me, his weary smile carried a hint of nostalgia. "Liv, look at those blossoms. Don't they remind you of yourself? Pure, innocent, fragile, needing my protection." I couldn't help but laugh. Perhaps there was a time when I truly looked up to Ethan, even felt grateful for his help. After all, back then I was Olivia, the girl with terrible English pronunciation, and he was Ethan, the young master of the family, skilled in tennis and horseback riding. I was underground and he was in the skies. But over the years, if I remained a fragile snowflake, how would I have made it to where I am today? If I still needed someone to protect me, who would have been there to shield Ethan, freshly returned from abroad, and help him secure his position as CEO? So Ethan, I could only be a rock. Ethan's gaze lingered on me. "Liv, have you also been reborn? You must have, otherwise you wouldn't have been so disappointed in me, leaving the company so decisively." "But Liv, in our last life, I didn't mean for you to die. I only wanted them to scare you a bit, to make you come back and admit your mistakes. It was them who acted on their own, acted on their own. Acted on their own to drown me in alcohol, acted on their own to strip me of my clothes, acted on their own to decide my damned fate. But Ethan, you were the one who found them. What were your instructions? To tie me up and beat me? To humiliate me but stop short of killing me? Or maybe just once, twice, and that's it? Or did you simply say, do whatever you want? Ethan, do you think that makes any difference? If it weren't for you picking these people, for your arrogance and poor judgment, thinking I had harmed Lily, I wouldn't have even gone to that place in the first place." Ethan's face turned pale. The empty hospital room fell into a chilling silence. After a long pause, he lifted his head again, showing a smile that bordered on deranged. "Liv, I was wrong. It took me a lifetime to realize that you were the one who genuinely cared for me. I know I was wrong. Please, give me a chance to make amends, will you?" I wiped the tears from the corner of my eye. Now that I had confirmed Ethan had been reborn, there was nothing left to discuss. No need. If you've got the guts, go make amends to the Olivia from the last life. The night after meeting Ethan, I dreamt for what felt like hours. In the fragmented memories, I pieced together the moments that had fueled his growing resentment toward me. Perhaps it was during high school, at some exam. Despite my atrocious pronunciation, I scored first in the grade in the one subject he excelled at, English. Or maybe it was in college, during one summer internship at the company. Uncle and I spent half the dinner talking about work, filled with technical jargon that Ethan couldn't understand. He slammed his chopsticks down and stormed off. Things only intensified when Ethan officially joined the company. After all, I had worked at the firm for 5 years, and naturally, my experience was more extensive. But no matter how humbly I offered suggestions, Ethan always seemed to think I was flaunting my credentials. And flaunting, in his mind, equated to mocking. Mocking meant looking down on the young CEO. So Ethan made sure to suppress me, to belittle me, to invalidate me. It was as if the only moments of satisfaction he found were when I bowed my head and admitted defeat. There were countless such instances, I couldn't even recall them all. I suppose, somewhere in those moments, the teenage Ethan and Olivia lost their way. More time passed. I heard Ethan had finally managed to get out of bed and into a wheelchair. He began taking steps to save the failing company, even going so far as to shamelessly arrange a meeting with Lily in San Francisco, hoping Maxwell might invest to rescue the firm. But Lily had her prenatal Pilates class to attend. No matter how many times Ethan pleaded, Lily only spared him enough time for a cup of coffee. This time, Ethan didn't dare make any moves that would alert her bodyguards in the shadows. He simply sat obediently and presented his cooperation proposal. Still, the results were far from ideal. "Mr. Ethan, I really can't help you. My husband says my only job right now is to take care of my pregnancy, so maybe you should find someone else, perhaps Olivia." The young woman gently stroked her belly and left the chair before it even warmed. "This coffee is awful. I'm not coming back here again," she remarked. Then, during that day's Pilates class, Lily experienced severe pain and heavy bleeding, losing her unborn child. According to the local tabloids, the ambulance was soaked in blood that day. But Maxwell, devoted as he was, only visited Lily once. Without the utility of bearing a child, Lily was nothing more than another warehouse ready to be burned down. Maxwell quickly found a new flame, one that bore a closer resemblance to his ex-wife. Lily, meanwhile, was soon sent back to Chicago. Later, I heard she never returned to work but spent her time chasing wealthy men. But when you don't respect yourself, others won't respect you either. The middle-aged tycoon Lily eventually latched onto never divorced his wife. And when the wife found out, Lily was dragged by her hair and berated for an hour in the middle of a shopping mall downtown. Then, once again, a familiar scene unfolded. Drops of blood began to seep onto the floor. Having miscarried before, Lily's second pregnancy had been unstable from the start. After a heated argument, the child was lost once again. "This is karma," Charlie remarked, sharing the gossip with me, leaving me feeling like I had stepped into another world. And then my mind wandered to another thread of urban legend: the disappearance of Ethan. Indeed, the coffee Lily drank had already been spiked with abortion medication by Ethan. He likely never intended to secure any investment from Maxwell in the first place. After all, once the coffee was finished, Ethan hopped in a car headed for the airport and vanished into thin air. As I mentioned before, Maxwell's fortune had shady beginnings. Even after Ethan fled abroad, it seemed he couldn't escape his fate. Rumors spread some claimed Ethan had been sold to Vietnam. Others whispered of sightings at some Southeast Asian tourist spot where he was seen disfigured and incomplete. I felt a twinge of pity, but not much sorrow. Instead, I seized the opportunity presented by the chaos at Ethan's company, where its stock prices had hit rock bottom, to unveil my long-prepared acquisition plan to the board. After all, cutting off the water supply is a classic move for anyone in business. When I returned to Ethan Corp., the entire company practically lined the halls to welcome me back. Everyone knew the days of turmoil were finally over. On the day the acquisition was completed, I unlocked my phone and reread a message Ethan had sent me long ago. "Liv, everything I owed you in the past life, I've repaid in full. Nobody ever taught me what hatred is, so I thought I always hated you. But later, I realized I only loved you so deeply that it hurt. In that past life, when I survived alone, I came across this sentence and thought of you and me. Liv, I've been wrong for so many years. All I wanted was for you to look up at me just one more time. When you're gone, I miss you so much. Liv, I love you." I took a drag from my cigarette and sighed deeply. Then, lowering my head, I deleted the message that had lingered on my phone for so long. I don't know how long Ethan survived after I died in that past life. But after all these years, he's still a master at staging his one-man show. He was the one who humiliated me. He was the one who hated me. And now he's the one claiming he's repaid his debts. Did Ethan ever truly love me? I don't know, but does it matter? Not really. In this life, I'm living well under the sun, holding shares of Ethan Corp in my hands. And to me, that's what truly matters. 2 more years passed. Under my leadership, the profits of several companies multiplied significantly, and the scope of business expanded further. After discussing with Ethan, I decided to rename Ethan Corp. To Live Ethan Group. Fresh off an award from overseas, Ethan had become increasingly indifferent to company matters. "You decide. I'm fine with naming it Olivia Group if you want," Ethan said casually, not even glancing at me as he meticulously polished his beloved trophy. Well, being carefree is a skill of its own, I suppose. But when I finished my work, I spotted a familiar trophy tucked away in a corner of the glass cabinet. Suddenly, I remembered something Charlie had mentioned a few days ago. "Liv, Ethan's award-winning piece this time. Why does the person he painted look so much like you?" Ethan's painting depicted a young girl crying by the seaside. At the time, I only gave it a glance, and memories instantly overwhelmed me. It was during the days when I had just started interning at Ethan Corp. Uncle had me shadow someone on a government project bid. However, Ethan Corp. wasn't selected. Looking back now, there were 1,000 more important reasons why it wasn't chosen. But my 21-year-old self stubbornly bore the responsibility on my own shoulders. Why wasn't I good enough? Why couldn't I do something for Uncle? Why? Suddenly, a boy passing by scooped me up in one swift motion. "Life's so great, why would you even consider this?" Huh. He thought I was about to jump into the sea, but in reality, I had just been blinded by tears and failed to notice the rising tide. Driven by emotion, I ended up sharing my story with this kind-hearted boy for what felt like hours. I remember him smiling. He said his family was also in business, and that he'd only ever heard of people shirking responsibility, not someone like me, who actively sought to take it on. If I had even half your sense of duty, my dad would probably dream about it every night and wake up laughing. How about this when you graduate, come work for my family. I'll introduce my dad to a great employee, and maybe he'll hit me less often. Sound good? He made me laugh through my tears. I didn't realize then that this random, fleeting conversation would someday mark the beginning of a new chapter in my life. End of the first story. Subscribe to my channel if you like my stories. Don't miss the second exciting story. Story 2. My younger sister had always claimed that she couldn't endure the hardships of studying and only wanted to live an easy life as a pampered wife. So, our parents arranged for her to marry into a wealthy family, while I pursued my academic path alone, earning my master's and doctorate degrees. After her marriage, though, her husband was unfaithful, and she became a laughingstock among the elite circles for her desperate attempts to catch him cheating. Meanwhile, my research projects thrived, earning me respect and admiration in the community. Even Alexander, the most sought-after bachelor, pursued me relentlessly. The stark contrast between our lives was too much for her to handle. "How can a bookworm like you have a better life than me?" she screamed, full of resentment. One day, when I returned home, she set the house on fire, dragging me down with her. But when I opened my eyes again, we were back in our childhood. She smirked triumphantly. "This time, it's my turn to shine. Alex will be mine." I couldn't help but laugh. Seriously, the man who was the biggest stain on my previous life, and here she was, treating him like a treasure. I smiled at her warmly. "If you want him so badly, then by all means take him." A soft breeze tickled my feet, making me feel slightly itchy. I opened my eyes slowly, greeted by the familiar sight of my childhood bedroom. The muted gray curtains swayed gently in the wind, and a desk sat by the window, stacked with textbooks. This was my room. I turned my head to see my younger sister Emmy lying on the bed, rubbing her eyes. She was back to being a little girl again. I quickly looked down at my own body. My arms were short, my feet tiny. A small red birthmark on my sole confirmed it was my body. I had been reborn. Emmy sat up, turning to look at me. Her eyes widened in shock for a moment before her lips curled into a smug smile. "Big sister, this time, it's my turn to shine. Alex will be mine." I couldn't contain my amusement. Alex, the biggest regret of my past life. And yet, she was treating him like a prize. I responded with a gentle smile. "If you want him so much, go ahead and have him." In our previous lives, Emmy despised studying. She always said she wanted an easy life and dreamed of being a pampered wife. When the son of the James family, Ethan, reached marriageable age, my parents seized the opportunity to arrange a match for her. But after the wedding, her husband's infidelity became a recurring scandal. She was reduced to hysteria, catching him cheating multiple times, and became the laughingstock of the elite social circle. I, on the other hand, dedicated myself to my studies. Alone but determined, I earned my advanced degrees. My research flourished, garnering respect and admiration from everyone around me, even catching the eye of Alexander, who pursued me aggressively. Emmy couldn't handle the stark difference in our lives. While I thrived, she watched her dreams crumble into dust, becoming nothing more than a joke. She seethed with hatred. "How could a nerd like you have a better life than me?" And when I came home one day, she set the house on fire, taking me with her. Now reborn, she wanted to take what was mine. Fine, let her have it. I didn't care. Emmy looked at my indifference and hesitated for a moment, but her smugness quickly returned. "What, do you think I can't do it? Mom loves me the most. All I have to do is tell her I don't want to marry into another family and that I want to focus on my studies. She'll never make me go through with the arrangement. Then the marriage will fall to you, and Alex will be mine." Listening to her grand plan, I pretended to be impressed and clapped my hands. "Bravo, Emmy, truly brilliant. Best of luck to you." She frowned at my reaction, clearly irritated. Just as she was about to snap at me, a knock on the door interrupted us. It was Mom. She entered with a warm smile, holding a plate of fruit. "Emmy, Liv, have some fruit first. Later, I'll take you to meet a little friend." A little friend. I racked my memory and realized who she was talking about. It was Ethan, the man Emmy was married to in our past lives. Because it had been so long and I hadn't interacted much with him before, I almost forgot we'd even met as kids. Emmy's face darkened as soon as she heard the words "little friend," her expression far too grim for her young age. Mom looked startled. "Emmy, what's wrong?" Emmy quickly adjusted her expression, switching to her usual sweet demeanor. "Mom, I don't want to meet any little friends. I'd rather stay home and study." Mom lovingly patted her on the head. "Since when do you like studying, Emmy? This little boy is very handsome. You'll definitely like him. We'll study when we get back, okay?" Emmy tried to argue, but Mom cut her off, feigning sternness. "No buts." In the end, Emmy couldn't win the argument and reluctantly followed us to meet the little friend. When we arrived, Ethan was playing with a remote-controlled car in his front yard. As soon as he saw us, he flashed us a big, cheerful smile. Emmy, however, looked at him as if he were her sworn enemy, her brows furrowed in anger. In our previous lives, Emmy had always been drawn to wealthy heirs, so she'd been very warm and friendly toward Ethan. Naturally, Ethan had liked her in return. After all, what kid wouldn't enjoy a little flattery? But this time, Ethan didn't even glance at her. Instead, he came straight to me. "Liv, do you want to play with the remote-controlled car?" "Let's play together," I stared at him, surprised. He looked at me with an expression that felt oddly familiar, carrying a maturity that seemed beyond his age. He had been reborn too. I nodded and smiled, saying, "All right." Emma glanced at the unfolding scene before her and curled her lip. "What's so fun about remote-controlled cars? Gross." Ethan frowned and turned to his dad. "Dad, I don't like this girl. She called me gross. Can we not invite her over to our house next time?" Ethan's dad glanced at Emma with a slight furrow in his brow, his gaze shifting to Ethan's mom with a hint of irritation. Ethan's mom's expression darkened as well as she fixed a stern look on Emma. Emma paled, unable to comprehend why Ethan acted out like this. In their past life, they had been on good terms. What she didn't realize was that in their previous life, she had clung to him, and he had only tolerated her because of it. This time around, things were different even without Ethan's rebirth. Emma had come in with an attitude, picking faults with him from the get-go. Ethan had never been one to be easily bullied. The fact that he hadn't retaliated physically was already showing restraint. Ethan tugged at his dad's hand persistently, asking, "Please, can we please?" Everyone in the room had their eyes fixed on Ethan and his dad. No one noticed the darkening expression on Emma's face. Unable to argue further, Ethan's dad finally ruffled Ethan's hair and replied, "All right, next time we'll only invite Olivia over, okay?" Ethan nodded cheerfully. "Okay, only Olivia from now on." Emma's glare grew even more venomous. I couldn't fathom why Ethan suddenly shifted his attention toward me, but seeing Emma's expression, I felt a surge of satisfaction. Deciding to stir the pot further, I held my mom's hand and softly said, "Emma said she plans to marry Alex someday and won't settle for anyone else. That's why she doesn't want to play with Ethan. Please don't be mad at her." My mom's face turned even grimmer as she shot Emma a disdainful look. Emma bit her lip angrily and snapped, "You're all terrible people. Ethan is just a flirt, and now you want me to marry him. You're all awful. I want to go home." The adults exchanged awkward glances, finding Emma's behavior increasingly odd. My mom tried to calm Emma down and eventually started chatting with Ethan's dad. She hoped Emma would join Ethan and me to play, but Emma refused and opted to sit beside my mom, listening to their conversation instead. Ethan and I continued playing with the remote-controlled cars. I leaned in and whispered to Ethan, "You were reborn too, weren't you?" Ethan flashed me a smile and replied softly, "You figured it out. You're sharp, Liv." I smiled back. "What's your plan with Emma? Why treat her like this?" Ethan scoffed lightly. "I don't like Emma. I didn't like her in my past life either. My dad forced me to marry her, and that's why I kept cheating on her." "So, are you planning not to marry her this time?" I asked. Ethan paused for 5 seconds before replying. "If I can marry someone else, of course, I'd prefer that." I realized Ethan's attention had shifted toward me. He wanted to marry me. After all, in our past life, I had been a prominent figure in our social circles, excelling in research projects and earning widespread admiration. I smirked slightly and stated, "If you want to marry me, that's fine, but you'll have to support me in continuing my education. I'll give you one chance to cheat. If you slip up again after that, we'll get divorced." Ethan chuckled. "Liv, if it's you, how could I ever risk cheating?" I ignored him. We played for a while longer before my mom called me over. After saying goodbye to Ethan's dad, my mom, Emma, and I returned home. Once we were home, my mom began scolding Emma. Emma, furious, started rambling nonsensically. "I'll say it again, I want to marry Alex, not Ethan. He's a flirt, and I'd rather die than marry him." My mom, enraged by Emma's attitude, gave her a beating and locked her in the small storeroom. Years flew by. Emma and I grew into young women. I excelled in academics, sports, arts, and social activities, a well-rounded individual. Emma, despite her efforts, barely managed to scrape passing grades in all her classes. One day, our mom returned home and called us over. She announced that the Harris family wanted to arrange a marriage and asked which of us would agree to it. Though she posed the question to both of us, her gaze was fixed on Emma. Given Emma's poor academic performance and my achievements, our mom was reluctant to have me sacrifice my future by marrying into the Harris family. Emma, however, adamantly refused, insisting she wanted to focus on her studies and rejecting the idea of an arranged marriage. I stepped forward and declared my willingness to marry into the Harris family. Mom, visibly relieved, hesitated but still expressed concern. "Liv, didn't you want to focus on your studies? Why are you willing to marry now?" I smiled and replied, "Mom, even after marriage, I can continue my education. I have a good impression of Ethan, and I'm willing to marry him." Mom was deeply comforted by my response. She finalized my engagement to Ethan. As I returned to my room, Emma sneered at me. "Ollie, congratulations on your marriage soon enough. You'll become the laughingstock of the elite wives circle, while I'll be Alex's woman. Alex is destined to be mine." I couldn't help but find it utterly ridiculous and chuckled. "Well, I wish you all the best in becoming Alex's woman someday." In this life, I married Ethan primarily to steer clear of someone like Alexander, the infamous heir to a powerful family. He was a complete lunatic. In my past life, he pursued me relentlessly, all because of my achievements and my appearance. He used to say he had never met someone so perfect, beautiful, accomplished in research, and intelligent. At first, his constant praise drew me in, and I found myself gradually falling for his words. But after we got together, his true colors emerged. He trampled on my self-esteem day after day. When I resisted, he would hit me. He would sneer, "A woman just needs money. Why bother with research? Stop pretending to be virtuous. Everyone's the same. You're with me for the money, aren't you? Fine, I'll give you money, but stop wasting your time on useless experiments. Seeing you live like a dog somehow makes me so happy." Our life together was a nightmare of endless arguments, and I was often left bruised and battered. Alexander had narcissistic personality disorder on one hand. He believed only someone like me was worthy of him. But on the other hand, he couldn't bear to see anyone around him surpass him. I never imagined I would encounter someone so twisted. Eventually, I decided I couldn't take it anymore and planned to leave him. But he threatened me with chilling calmness, saying, "If you leave me, I'll destroy your career and make sure you have nothing left." With no other options, I was forced to live in his shadow, a stain on my life I could never erase. This time, I vowed never to let him control me again. Before long, my marriage to Ethan was finalized, and I became his wife. To my surprise, he treated me well and remained faithful throughout our marriage. Emma, however, was visibly upset when she learned about my marriage to Ethan. Her smug expression twisted into something almost grotesque. "Well, Ollie, just wait and see, you'll be the laughingstock of the social elite in no time. People don't change, especially not for someone like you, a bookworm." What Emma didn't know was that in my past life, after discovering Alexander's narcissistic personality disorder, I began studying psychology. Over time, I had many conversations with Ethan and learned about his past. As it turned out, his mother had passed away when he was young, leaving him with a deep void from the lack of maternal love. In my past life, he had sought that nurturing connection from Emma, but all she cared about was money and social status. She never truly cared for Ethan. It was no surprise that Ethan gravitated toward women who reminded him of his mother, leading to his repeated infidelity. In my past life, Ethan had been drawn to me, but since he was already married and carried a tarnished reputation, he refrained from pursuing me. I started to suspect that I might have qualities that reminded him of his mother. I asked him, "Is there something about me that reminds you of your mom?" He thought for a moment before answering, "My mother was a kind and strong woman, but let me be clear, I don't see you as a replacement for her. I love you for who you are, not because you remind me of her. Liv, being with you in this life is my greatest fortune." I reached out and hugged him. "I'll stay by your side in this lifetime, as long as you remain faithful." He pulled me close, burying his head into my shoulder, and whispered with emotion, "Don't worry. It's only you this time. I won't betray you." With my support and understanding, his psychological issues gradually improved, and we were genuinely happy together. Emma, however, watched from the sidelines, seething with anger. A leopard can't change its spots. Just wait, it'll all come crashing down. I smiled faintly and chose to ignore her. Determined to win Alex's favor, Emma took a job at a restaurant to catch his attention. Since she had neither academic achievements nor any notable skills, Alex initially dismissed her. Desperate, she conspired with our mother to buy her way into becoming the top student at school, hoping the title of valedictorian would catch Alex's eye. Finally, under the glow of her fabricated accomplishments, Alex began to notice her. He started asking her out. To impress him, Emma began splurging on designer brands, draining our family's savings. Though our mother struggled financially, she pushed herself to the limit, believing Emma's relationship with Alex would elevate the family's status. Eventually, the financial strain became too much, and our mother turned to me for help. "Emmy is doing so well, she's dating Alex now. You should help support her. Who knows, one day, the family might have to rely on her connections to Alex." Ethan had no intention of lending them money. In the previous life, he had grown to despise Emma. Her vanity was insatiable, and she blamed every failure in her marriage on him. He remembered sharing his work struggles with her, only for her to dismiss his feelings and demand designer handbags. It wasn't a one-time incident but a recurring pattern. Feeling that he couldn't connect with her emotionally, Ethan eventually sought solace elsewhere. Emma, of course, blamed everything on Ethan, painting herself as the victim. Ethan's resentment grew, and his affairs became more blatant, turning Emma into a laughingstock among the elite social circles. This time, he wanted nothing to do with her troubles. But I gently placed my hand over his and said softly, "If they want to borrow money, let them. Alex is not a good person. In my past life, I was with him, and trust me, he's a complete psychopath." In that life, Emma hated seeing me with Alex. She ended up going to extreme lengths to ruin us both. "She worries every day about you cheating and us falling out. We should give her something to think about," Ethan said, his voice tinged with anger. He knew Emma was the one who had stirred up trouble, hoping to see us break up. Ethan, visibly upset, replied, "Fine, let's lend her the money. Hopefully, she'll get together with Alex soon." So Ethan lent Emma a sum of money. As she counted the bills, a cold smile spread across her face. "Don't get too comfortable. Once Alex and I are officially together, I'll repay you. After all, I don't want to have any ties with people of poor character." Ethan sneered. I smiled gently and said, "Emma, I sincerely hope you and Alex get together soon. Who knows, maybe we'll benefit from it too." Emma gave us a disdainful look and said arrogantly, "We'll see." Ethan and I exchanged a knowing glance, understanding the situation without needing to speak. After Ethan and I got married, I continued advancing my studies, participating in various academic research projects. I even won an award for one of them. Ethan also excelled academically, which pleased his father immensely. As a result, his father gifted us a generous sum to go on a vacation. We chose to visit the White Lovers Park in Hokkaido. While strolling through the park, we unexpectedly bumped into Alex and Emma. Emma clung to Alex's arm, radiating sweetness. Spotting us, they approached. Alex looked at me, a hint of curiosity in his eyes. "Emma, who are they?" he asked. Emma smiled dismissively and said, "They're my sister and brother-in-law. All they do is wander around aimlessly." Alex extended his hand toward me. "Hi, I'm Alexander, Emma's boyfriend." I didn't take his hand but instead held Ethan's arm. "Hello, this is my husband. It's quite the coincidence to run into you here." Alex glanced at Ethan and me, disappointment flickering in his eyes, and awkwardly withdrew his hand. "Yeah, what a coincidence," he replied. Emma noticed Alex's reaction, and a hint of anxiety crossed her face. She quickly turned to me with a forced smile. "Sis, why aren't you working on your experiments anymore? Traveling like this might impact your progress." She had no idea that, in my previous life, Alex had been most fascinated by my dedication to research. Alex's eyes lit up with interest. "Your sister does experiments?" he asked Emma. I quickly interjected, "Oh, I just help out senior researchers occasionally. Nothing serious, mostly assisting with odd jobs and earning a few credits. That's why I have time to travel like this." Upon hearing this, Alex's expression turned dismissive. Emma's face visibly brightened, probably thinking I had sensibly stepped aside and wouldn't compete with her for Alex's attention. Feeling triumphant, Emma took Alex's hand and led him away. Watching them disappear into the distance, I couldn't help but laugh inwardly. Finally, I had rid myself of Alex's shadow, a man Emma still treasured enough to harm me for. Ethan came over, took my hand, and said softly, "Those two are a perfect match. Villains deserve each other." I chuckled and led him to a nearby dessert shop. Later that evening, we returned home after receiving a call from Mom. She had invited Alex over to meet the family because Emma and Alex's relationship was now official. Initially, Ethan and I planned to enjoy a seafood buffet, but Mom insisted we join them, leaving us no choice but to comply. When we arrived, Alex was already seated. He looked uncomfortable, fidgeting as though the chair was too small and restricting. Mom hovered around him like a servant, constantly offering tea and adjusting his seat. Meanwhile, Emma watched with satisfaction, her demeanor as proud as a princess among peasants. She glanced at me, then began boasting about Alex. "Sis, this is Alex, my boyfriend. You should get to know him. His connections might be useful for your husband someday. He's not just anyone." Ethan played along, politely greeting Alex. "Hello." Alex barely spared him a glance. "Hello," he muttered, and said nothing more. Ethan's brow twitched slightly, though he remained composed. While Ethan's family wasn't the wealthiest in the city, they ranked fifth, with stable businesses and a leading role in emerging technologies that promised significant growth. On the other hand, Alex's family dealt in real estate, a sector losing its appeal in recent times, facing potential downfall at any moment. A smirk played on my lips as I watched Emma and Alex's performance unfold. Soon, the hired cook served dinner, and we all sat at the table. Ethan leaned over and whispered to me, "Your mom is pulling out all the stops to latch onto Alex's family." I chuckled, replying softly, "Just wait a moment." Alex picked up a shrimp coated in sauce and began eating, only to immediately cough violently. His face turned a shade of red as he struggled to recover. Emma hurriedly handed him a glass of water. Alex took a sip before reassuring everyone, "I'm fine." Ethan picked up another slice of cucumber, and his face changed dramatically again before he started coughing uncontrollably. I couldn't help but laugh inwardly. Ethan couldn't tolerate spicy food, yet the entire dinner table was filled with dishes tailored to Emmy's taste, every single one of them spicy. Ethan had managed to endure the first bite without losing his temper. But with his narcissistic personality, believing the world should revolve around him, there was no way he would tolerate it a second time. As expected, he slammed his chopsticks down with a loud thud, his face darkened. "Why is the food so spicy? Is this how you treat your guests?" "I'm done here. I'm leaving." Emma was startled, and so was my mom. She immediately tried to explain, "We didn't know you couldn't eat spicy food. I'll have the cook make something else right away. Please don't leave." Ethan cast them a cold glance, then turned and stormed out of the house without a backward glance. The door slammed shut with a loud bang, startling both Emma and my mom. My mom, seeing Ethan leave, grabbed Emmy's arm and pushed her toward the door. "Go after him quickly." Emma ran out in a hurry. Later that evening, Emma called me. "Olivia, you knew Ethan couldn't eat spicy food. Why didn't you tell me earlier?" I had been expecting her call. I replied, "I honestly didn't know. All the food at home is usually spicy. I haven't been home for a while, so I didn't know if our family had changed its preferences." "You're Ethan's girlfriend. How could you not know he can't eat spicy food?" Emma was clearly frustrated and snapped, "You did this on purpose, but it doesn't matter. Ethan has already forgiven me. Once Ethan and I are truly together, we'll have a blissful life. You can just wait for your husband to cheat on you and become the laughingstock of the elite social circle." Hearing her curses, I chuckled. "Don't get your hopes up. Ethan and I are practically inseparable right now. There's no way your scenario will happen. I'd suggest you focus on yourself first." Emma became even angrier and hissed, "We'll see about that." After she hung up, I thought to myself, what a pair of fools, they truly deserve each other. Ethan had initially wanted to break up with Emma, but her relentless persistence made it impossible for him to leave. However, Ethan's attention seemed to have shifted away from Emma. He was now busy chasing after other women, each one more impressive than the last, and engaging in all sorts of affairs. Emma blamed me for all of this. Knowing my sister as well as I do, I was almost certain she'd try to mess with Ethan to provoke some drama in my life. I warned Ethan to be on guard. He's a smart guy. Flashing me an okay sign, he reassured me, "Don't worry." Sure enough, a few nights later, Ethan didn't come home until very late. I called him repeatedly, but his phone was unreachable. Anxiety started to creep in. Moments later, Emmy called me. "Ollie, Ethan hasn't come home yet, has he? You might want to head over to the Morningstar Hotel, room 103, and check things out. It's probably still going on." I told you, a man like Ethan wouldn't change for anyone, haha. I realized my prediction had come true, but I also knew Ethan wouldn't fall for Emmy's tricks. I quickly got dressed and rushed to the Morningstar Hotel. Standing outside room 103, I felt a mix of nervousness and relief when I heard the voices inside. Pushing the door open, I found Ethan chatting with another woman. The woman was likely someone Emmy had hired. When Ethan saw me, he immediately pulled me into an embrace. "Liv, I almost lost myself tonight. Thank goodness you came." I rolled my eyes, tousled his hair, and said, "Good boy." Straightening up, Ethan gave me a knowing look and said, "But I think I've found a way to deal with that vile Emma." Following his gaze, I turned to the woman in the room. She smiled at me. I studied her face and felt a sense of familiarity. After a moment's recollection, I realized she was Sophia, Emmy's former classmate. In our previous life, Emmy, drunk on her status as a wealthy wife, had mercilessly bullied her peers at school. Sophia was one of her victims. Sophia came from a modest background and largely kept to herself at school, making her an easy target for Emmy. Emmy forced her to do her homework, polish her shoes, and act as her personal servant. If Sophia dared resist, Emmy and her clique would beat her up and ridicule her. Sophia had no shortage of scars from those encounters. Despite the abuse, Sophia remained resilient, attending school and working hard. Later, she unexpectedly dropped out. Because Sophia didn't have many friends, no one knew the real reason for her departure. In this life, I finally understood why Sophia had left school. Her father had fallen seriously ill, and Sophia had quit school to earn money for his treatment. But this time, due to my intervention, Emmy hadn't driven Sophia to leave. Instead, Emmy had made her a promise. If Sophia slept with Ethan, she'd give her a sum of money to pay for her father's treatment. Emmy even drugged Ethan with an aphrodisiac, but she hadn't anticipated that Ethan had already prepared himself for such a scheme. Ethan is incredibly smart. Knowing Emmy would exploit his past weaknesses, he had equipped himself with an antidote for the drug and carried it with him at all times. After deceiving Emma, Ethan started chatting with Sophia. That's when we uncovered Sophia's secret. I said to Sophia, "If you help us expose Emma's true colors, I'll give you enough money to cover your dad's medical bills. What do you think?" Sophia hesitated for a moment before saying, "All right, as long as it helps my dad, I'm willing to do anything." Ethan and I went back home. Not long after, Emma called. "Ollie, how's it going? Is my brother-in-law treating you well? But don't get mad. Men like your husband are dogs who can't change their ways. Even if he was with someone else, he'd still cheat. You'd better just tolerate it." Listening to Emma's smugness, I found it amusing. Laugh now, but you won't be laughing tomorrow. I couldn't be bothered to argue with her and simply replied, "Ethan and I just went out for some barbecue. We had a great time. Gotta go." Emma was taken aback and wanted to say more, but I hung up the phone. "Babe, I'm in the mood for something a little naughty," Ethan said, sliding his hand around my waist with a mischievous grin. I smiled back at him and turned off the lights. The next day, the internet was flooded with news. A video of Emma bullying someone went viral. In the footage, Emma was in the restroom, ordering someone to smear soiled paper on Sophia while spitting at her. When Sophia tried to resist, her hair was pulled and she was pinned to the ground. The others laughed and jeered. Sophia shared a heartfelt video online, recounting her experience of being bullied. Emma became infamous overnight, with countless people criticizing her online. Emma called me, furious. "Olivia, what on earth did you do to Sophia? Why is she helping you?" I chuckled and said, "Nothing happened with Ethan yesterday. Enjoy what's coming to you." Then, I ended the call. Emma wanted to confront Sophia, but Sophia had already transferred schools. Back at school, other students mocked Emma, saying, "Look, the internet celebrity is here." Students she had previously bullied yelled at her. "Karma's a bee, you deserve it, hope your life just gets filthier." Some even sprayed ink on her. In no time, Emma's once pristine school uniform was covered in dark stains. Unable to stomach the humiliation, Emma went home to complain to her mom. Her mom called me to find out what was going on. I told her the truth. After hearing it, her mom refused to help her and left her to deal with it on her own. Out of options, Emma decided to turn to Alexander. When Alexander saw the state Emma was in, he didn't want anything to do with her. He thought she was embarrassing. Emma cried and pleaded, "None of this is true. Olivia set me up. Sophia was bullying me, so I got a few people to teach her a lesson. I'm the one being framed. I've been busy studying. I don't have time for this nonsense." Alexander didn't believe her. Emma was left utterly alone. She avoided school for a long time. Still, Emma wouldn't give up. She remembered that in my previous life, I was a lab technician, and Alexander had always admired that about me. After returning to school, Emma applied to work in the school's lab as a technician. Because of her decent academic performance, the school approved her request. And just like that, Emma became a lab technician. One day, by chance, we ran into each other outside a restaurant. Emma smugly said to me, "Being a lab technician isn't that hard. Now I'm one too." Even though Alexander and I broke up, I'm confident that if I keep being my best self, he'll come back to me eventually. I smiled and said, "Well, I hope your dreams come true soon." Emma seemed to enjoy my compliments. She smiled back and walked into the restaurant. Thinking about her demeanor just now, I couldn't help but laugh to myself. Being a lab technician isn't as easy as she thinks. She's studying chemistry. One small mistake in her experiments could lead to accidents. If that happens, she'll be facing expulsion. When Alexander heard that Emma had become a lab technician, his attitude toward her changed. Alexander had always been drawn to that kind of aloof, intellectual aura. But once he got what he wanted, he'd humiliate and control them, turning someone proud into his obedient puppet. Emma, however, was clueless about any of this. She happily went on dates with Alexander, ran errands for him, and did everything she could to win his approval. Alexander, of course, enjoyed the attention. Who wouldn't like being flattered? Emma seemed content, even enduring Alexander's occasional harsh treatment. A month later, Alexander's grandmother fell gravely ill. Her dying wish was to see Alexander get married. Emma saw this as her chance. She started frequenting Alexander's house, bringing fruit and health supplements for his grandmother, acting as if she were already part of the family. Although Alexander's grandmother didn't care for Emma, suspecting her of being after their money, she didn't say much because Emma was so good at sweet-talking her. Of course, Olivia had her reasons for staying quiet. Alexander suffered from narcissistic personality disorder, a well-known fact within his family, but hidden from the public as a shameful secret. Alexander's grandmother understood that given his condition, it would be difficult to find someone who genuinely cared for him. However, even if true love was out of the question, finding someone who was after his wealth wasn't entirely impossible. After all, Alexander would always have money, and with his cunning, there was no way Emma could con their family out of it. So, Alexander's grandmother happily enjoyed Emma's attentive service, and Emma gladly played her role. After a month, Alexander's grandmother decided it was time for Emma and Alexander to get married. Emma was delighted with this arrangement, and soon they selected a suitable date and tied the knot. Unfortunately, the weather didn't cooperate. It was a gloomy, rainy day. After the wedding, Alexander continued his philandering ways, paying little attention to Emma. Determined to win his favor, Emma decided to conduct an experiment to impress him. She called me, asking for help with her experiment. I suspected she wanted me to do all the work while taking credit for herself. She sweetened the deal by promising to convince Alexander to give Ethan more business opportunities. Imagining Emma's smug demeanor, I thought it over and agreed. On the day of the experiment, I taught Emma in the lab, guiding her step by step. Emma's academic achievements were bought, so she had no clue about actual experiments. Yet, she loved to show off, acting like she knew everything. While we were working, Ollie, an older student, walked in to grab some equipment. Curious, she asked, "Emmy, who's this?" Emma scoffed, "Oh, just my assistant." I stiffened momentarily before replying to Ollie, "Hello." Ollie looked surprised but responded politely, "Hello," before leaving with her things. As I gazed at the flammable materials on the table, memories of a fire in my previous life flashed through my mind. A faint smile tugged at my lips. I placed a large chunk of potassium next to a cup of water and said, "Emma, I need to use the restroom. I'll be back shortly to continue." I nudged the experimental setup toward her and added, "Keep an eye on these. With your intellect, I'm sure you'll manage perfectly." Emma beamed at the compliment, clearly energized. Hurry up already, I've got this," she said confidently. Casting a glance at the potassium and water, I left the lab. In the restroom, I silently counted down, knowing her arrogance and lack of basic knowledge would lead her to mess with the materials. She'd likely boast about completing the experiment without me when I returned. 3, 2, 1. Boom, the sound of an explosion reverberated through the building, shocking everyone. People rushed to the lab to investigate. Emma crawled out, injured and pleading for help. She was sent to the hospital immediately. Her face, chest, arms, and hands suffered severe burns, leaving her disfigured. Alexander, upon seeing her condition, grew even more impatient and disgusted with her, almost throwing divorce papers at her on the spot. Emma was furious, but had no outlet for her rage. She vented her frustration by stabbing dolls with a knife in the hospital. Some classmates visited her and asked about the incident. Emma admitted she had combined potassium and water. They were stunned by her amateur mistake, especially since she was supposed to be so academically gifted. Her lies unraveled as her secret about buying grades came to light. Alexander, already fed up with her, felt utterly deceived and humiliated. Without hesitation, he presented her with divorce papers, demanding separation. Emma, now disfigured and penniless, refused to agree, leading to prolonged disputes. Eventually, Alexander's narcissistic personality disorder was exposed. The media uncovered horrifying details. Alexander had murdered numerous young women and buried their bodies in the backyard of his mansion, a total of 32 victims. The revelation shocked the public. Who could have imagined that the heir to such a prominent family was a psychopath and a serial killer? The Alexander family's stock plummeted. The scandal surrounding Alexander and Emma became the talk of the town. Alexander's grandmother, already frail, passed away from the stress. Alexander was arrested and sentenced to death for his crimes. Emma, ruined and despairing, reached out to me one night. I knew her intentions. She likely wanted to drag me down with her, but I was prepared to outsmart her. Ethan and I placed a large trampoline near the window and waited outside. When Emma set the fire, I ran to the window and jumped out onto the trampoline we had prepared. Ethan quickly helped me pack it up. Emma rushed to the window and saw us removing the trampoline, letting out a chilling scream. "Liv, you deserve to die, why isn't it you?" I turned back to her. "Enjoy the next few minutes. Karma will take care of the wicked." Ethan exchanged a glance with me, a relaxed smile appearing on his face, his eyes filled with contentment. After that, he took my hand, and together we left the hospital. Ahead of us lay a long and blissful life. As for Emmy, she perished in the flames, leaving behind only ridicule and disgrace in the world.